Hello, welcome to another episode with me, Khandie. This is The Loud Lens, and we are jumping in on a hell of a spicy little debate. But this is your place. If you're not already subscribed, do so now for your blunt, honest, everything, no nonsense guide to photography, life as a photographer, and all the things that go with that. So get subscribed. If you're not, then you're going to miss episodes, and we've got some good ones coming up if you've not already listened to some great ones. But we're going to talk about something that I posted on my Instagram reel. So if you're not following me, you probably won't have seen this. There's another hint, go follow me. And it's a little debate about street photography, your right or someone else's fight, which I think is a very nice, clicky little title for you. But it's also about the legal drama that's been going on. And we're going to break it down both on UK laws, because I was astounded when I posted this, how few photographers who profess to be professional actually understood what the law said about photography in public spaces, but also about copyright. So I'm going to preface this, mostly this will be about the UK. I will dabble into other areas, but I want you to say this is where we need to be talking. And you might be surprised that loads of you go on holiday and start doing content that and you're a street photographer, just how dicey some of the rules in other countries can get into. So we all love a bit of legal drama. We love a bit of tea spillage. So let's get into this episode. Street photography, your right or someone else's fight. So the reason why we're talking about this is because I was on another social media platform and I came across a video of a mother. So picture the scene. It's Scotland. It's beautiful. There's a Christmas market on and you're out there and you're taking your kiddos out and you're enjoying the Christmas market and you become acutely aware of a photographer photographing. And she just so happens to photograph your child. You can see that. And you're like, I'm not too happy about this. Now, I am not going to say that there is anything wrong with the way this mother in her mind's went, I don't want someone photographing my kid. I get it, right? We're going to try and separate the legal side, the ethical, moral side, and the emotional side from this. But okay, so you go up to that photographer and you say, hey, I don't want my kid photographed. Can you delete it? And the photographer does what I wouldn't have done. So I normally smile and say, yeah, not a problem. Although I don't actually photograph kids that often. Like if I am, they're not the main focus typically. Unless I'm told I can. It's just not something I do. But this photographer did not. Instead, this photographer said, I'm not deleting the picture. It's every right I've got. I don't have to delete it. I'm legally allowed to take pictures in public. And boom, the match was lit. This mother is now gone to her local MP to look at changing the law about photographing children in public spaces. Now, let's get this straight. Was the photographer wrong? Legally? No. Ethically, well, that's where things get a little messy. And I'm going to be honest, I was a little shocked at how people responded, because I'm not a parent, but I can definitely see from the parents' point of view why they did what they did. But I also can understand why the photographer stood up for themselves. But I think this is not a hill that you want to die on, but we're going to get into it, okay? So here in the UK, and I'm going to preface this, in the UK, you can pretty much take a picture of anything as long as you're in a public space, okay? So there's no expectation of privacy. That's what the law says. No expectation of privacy when you're out and about, provided you're in a public space. Now, that can mean a park, a street, and yes, even a Christmas market. People can take your photos without asking, and there's literally legally sod all you can do about it. Now, I will say, I want to preface that you shouldn't be thinking every photographer has got some nefarious reason why they're photographing, okay? Because there are all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life who could be capturing images or even just looking that way. I hate to say it, we live in a world where we need to understand that side of it. But just so you know, a person with a camera who might have been hired to photograph or is doing their own job as a photographer, shooter, or I do street photography, just going out taking pictures for your own thing, right? There are many times that you're going to be captured without you realizing. Dash cameras, meta glasses, you know the ones where people wear the glasses, they've got a little camera in. Other people's background of their photos, their selfies, their videos, CCTV, you name it, you're being captured a lot more than you think. So to just say, I don't want any professional photographer taking a picture of me, I kind of have to say, you're implying that professional photographers or photographers have some sort of nefarious reason to photograph you. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, there isn't ones, but, you know. Now, itchy. I want to say, this is where it gets a little murky though. Just because you can take a photo doesn't mean you always should. And let's not be weird about it, and let's not pretend photographers haven't sometimes crossed the lines. Those lines are ones that are invisible and made up in our heads by our own ethics and morals. And what might be right for somebody else might not be right for me. And I struggle with some people who do it. You know, there's a photographer in New York who goes up to people and has a big flash that goes off in their face, and he's lauded and applauded by the art scene, the photographic scene. For me, I would absolutely hate that and I would object. But again, the laws over there are slightly different, but I do think having a massive flash go off in your face, you know, the what ifs could be done. Like, I know it's called, like, I think they call it whataboutism, but you know, you don't know if someone's got epilepsy, you can't. But the idea is, you know, you might set it off. And also, one of the arguments was put that you don't know why that child is out there. I kind of want to just say, the thing is, they're in a public space. It's going to be incredibly hard to police that. But I do think if a mother or somebody comes up to say, hey, delete my picture, I think there has got to be a point where you have to make a decision on what that, because if it's a child, there's a lot more that could be going on with that child. They could be escaping violence or anything like that, and a parent. And there might be a reason why they wanted that picture deleted. They don't have to tell you that. But before you go, no, I'm not deleting it, have a little think how that sits with your conscience. Now, in France, they take privacy much more seriously. I don't know if I can say seriously, but you actually need permission to publish a photo of someone, even if they're in public. And in Germany, they have something called personality rights. So if someone can be clearly, and I want to preface that, clearly identified in your shot, you could be in hot water if they don't like it. But in the UK and US, it's kind of meant a free-for-all. I'm not going to say quote me on that, but you know, the general gist is. So unless you're being an absolute creep, or the image is being used for some commercial gain, you're kind of good to go. But one of the things that came up for me was when I was talking about this on my reels was how few people knew about copyright. In fact, someone said to me, oh, but the photographer could then go and put copyright on it. And I was like, in the UK, like, we need to talk about this. And it was really shocking to see how many photographers didn't know about copyright. And I was like, what's going on? You're meant to be professionals. So let's talk about copyright. So here within the UK, again, preface here with the UK, the moment you press that shutter, that photo is yours. Period, end of. It doesn't matter if it's a blurry shot of your foot. It doesn't matter if it's an award-winning portrait. If you took it, you own it, and there's automatic copyright allocated to you, okay? It's already yours, baby. You got it. Now, in the UK, no one can demand that you hand over RAWs or delete a photo just because they're in it. They can't demand that. No one can use your photo without permission unless it falls under fair use, which is a legal headache, which we're not going to get into because there's a little bit on that I don't want to cover because it needs to be a proper legal beagle on that, legal beagle. And fun fact, even if someone pays you for your photos, you still own the copyright unless you explicitly sign them away. That's right. So your clients who say, just because I gave you the money doesn't mean you own the picture. You own the license to have the picture I present to you, not the whole picture. And I will just say there is a few discrepancies in that. And I've already mentioned that unless you sign away explicitly, if you're hired by a third party, sometimes they'll have it in the contract that they own the exclusive copyright. You need to check these contracts. And this is why I say everyone should have contracts. Now, when you're shooting in public spaces, that's not required. If you're not shooting someone intent, like you're not got a model there and shooting them. It's when you're just out and about. It's very different. Now, other countries, they do it differently. In the US, copyright works pretty much the same as the UK, but in China, it's a little dicey. There, the law is little more towards the person who is in the photo rather than the person who took the photo. In Italy, you need permission to sell or publish a photo of someone unless it's considered newsworthy, which I don't know how they barometer that, but newsworthy. So the bottom line is, if you're photographing internationally, you better do your bloody research before you end up in a legal mess. But here in the UK, it's quite clear cut for us. Now, if we go back to the Scotland incident, the photographer was legally right with what they said, but was it the right thing to do? So here is where common sense, I think, needed to kick in. And I feel like if someone's uncomfortable, particularly a parent, you just ask yourself, is this a hill worth dying on? Is this the best shot of my career? Do I need to keep it? I mean, there was many people in my on my reel commenting saying, oh, you shouldn't have to do it. It's your work, you can do it. But I'm wondering, is it really worth the fight for that? I don't think it is. I personally don't. I don't think there's anything, unless it's an absolute groundbreaking image, which most likely it wasn't. I feel like you kind of should have really thought about this. But again, someone said, if the mother was rude to me, I wouldn't delete it either. You know, I'm doing my job. I don't understand why I suddenly can't. But I feel like when we're in a society where there's so much horrible press and news and stories about people doing horrible things, we need to be very careful about that. And I hate that photographers are tarnished with this, because the photographers are not some creepy guy walking around with a, you know, doing stuff. But we are being displayed as that, because let's be real, some photographers have stepped over the mark and have a reputational damage for us. So, you know, I know for a fact there was one photographer here in this town who photographed some kids at a play park. He told the mother was fine with it, took some pictures, and then he followed that mother home and demanded she paid him for the photos. And she said that's not what the deal was. In the end, her partner had to chase him off. And he went around telling people this story. And then everyone was like, oh, that's really bad, until he met me. And obviously I then sort of had the one-way conversation when you followed a woman home and there's nothing wrong with that in your head. That scares me. That's a very isolated incident, I'd like to think. But for me, I think there are ways which you, and the legal standpoint, I'm not telling you can't. Another thing that was brought up by a very good photographer, Dr. Denise, who actually said, you know what, it's really weird when you go to like places like overseas, Europe, Africa, all these big other countries, people happily just photograph the kids and just don't think about it. And they kind of tokenize it and they call it travel photography. What you're actually doing is portrait photography, if I'm honest. There's a whole complex issue on that, and I think that'd be a really worthwhile discussion to have with somebody who has a unique perspective on that, and I'd love to do that. So that might be a future episode where we talk about these kind of debates and how we perceive certain culture and certain ethnicities to be photographed one way. And anyway, I'm getting down the debate and we're not going to go into that one just yet. So for me, I try and do a thing where I engage with the people. I smile and say, hey, I'm a photographer. Do you mind if I take a shot? And now obviously you might want some candids. That's not going to work for you. But I do think if there is a chance, I try and get in. And knowing when to walk away, like there has to be this moment when you know you've got the shot and you need to walk away. Don't stay for ages photographing, because the longer you're there photographing, the more sinister it looks. If you know what I mean, you're there like click, 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 click. It doesn't look good. And understand that we have a very unique public perception. When we live in a time when everyone's wary of cameras, and so you kind of need to be mindful, but also know your rights. You know, like that doesn't mean that you don't have to do horrible things, but I think we need to be very careful about how we approach this situation. Now, I personally love being a street photographer. I love it. I go around. It's a hobby of mine. I've actually won an award for one of mine with the lady in the yellow dress. And I love it. And I can see why people love it. It's a nice, gentle, I think it's quite a gentle type of photography to do. There's some I went on a walk with Sean Tucker, and I've been to the Oslo Street Photography Festival, and I've done lots of things. I've really enjoyed myself, and for me, street photography has always been like a passion project, because everything I do is very portrait and very stylized, and I love it. But to have this like, I don't know what's coming next, I'm just going to go out with a camera. And I've done many YouTube videos on me doing it, and they really prove popular. And I enjoy doing them in every visit I go to, every town I go to, I enjoy doing it. But again, I have a background where I was brought up to be very aware of who was around me and what people were doing. And we've all heard the horror stories of the boogeyman or, whoever, like taking pictures and, oh, there's a creepy guy taking pictures. And, there is something a little bit weird, even for me, when I've been out on street photography walks where, I've shown up and I try to go a little bit incognito, so I don't have the big telescopic lenses on. I really love at the minute, currently it might change at the minute, my 40mm f2 from Nikon. I'm on the Z series. I love that. It doesn't give me the massive versatility of, say, the 24-70 that I've seen a lot of people use, but I enjoy that focal length for me. It's a nice sort of segue between my love for the 50 and I kind of starting to love again the 35. It's a nice little thing. It's very discreet as well, because it's such a flat lens. And I feel like that makes me less noticeable. That doesn't mean I'm like being sneaky. But, you're going on the street photography and then you walk down and there's a guy with a massive 70-200 lens on his camera. It suddenly has this uncomfortable feeling for me as a photographer, because I'm like, what are you photographing? But again, I have to stop thinking like that, because I'm like, I shouldn't judge every photographer like that. But if you see it from the outside and that one photographer has got that telefocal length on, you kind of can see why members of the public would find it uncomfortable. Particularly, it gives you, the paparazzi, and we don't necessarily have the greatest respect as a nation for the paparazzi. And I'm not hating on them. It is a job and they're earning money. But, we also don't, we've become very aware of our image at this stage. I think, you can only talk about, like, I photographed my friend's kid on her phone. She was like, can you take it again? Can you take it again? Can you take it again? Can you take it? And I don't look good. And I'm noticing this more and more. So we've become very aware of how we perceive ourselves online. And that feeds into it. And then there's all the horror stories of people, you know, doing horrible things with photos and behaviors towards children. I don't want to trigger anyone on that, but also that happens. So people's public perception of photography has been changed. And what's worse is there's always that one photographer who goes too far and, you know, gets nasty. I remember there was one on TikTok where the photographer started having a full-up screaming match at somebody in a park, and everyone was going mad about it, and no one was siding with the photographer. They were all angry at them. How dare they? And I feel like it, you know, for every 100 great photographers who are respectful, there's always that one that stands out. Now, I'm not going back to the Scottish situation. I am not blaming that photographer for doing anything other than saying, well, it is my legal right. I personally, and it's just an opinion piece, this whole thing's just an opinion piece, I would have deleted it. But I equally admire them for standing up for themselves for what they did. But I don't think in this instant, when it comes to children, it's just not worth the fight. However, it's a very uncomfortable situation because, one, I want to applaud the photographer standing up for their right. They've done nothing illegal. And then you go, oh, but morally, people's moral compass is not the same as yours or mine, and ethically, similarly. I don't think just because my moral compass says to do something that they've done something, you shouldn't judge them harshly. But I don't think this situation would have escalated to the level it has had they just deleted it. But equally, we're only getting the mother's side of the story, and obviously it's diluted by me because I'm recalling it. And this is just an opinion, but I do worry what will happen if this legislation did get changed. One, how the hell would you police it? And it's not just effect for street photographers. It would come into effect for like people who shoot in public space anyway, like doing family portraits, doing weddings. It would change because you'd have to be like, can everyone give me permission? You'd have to get all these forms. And then what happens if someone walks past, you can't shoot. Now, I don't tend to shoot that. But anyway, that's what happens. And you know, it suddenly becomes a big deal. Everyone thinks, oh, it'll just be street photographers. But it's not just going to be street photographers. It's going to be lots of people. So where do we go from here? Should the law change? Personally, I think we need to be careful about messing with photography laws, because once you start banning things, it's a very slippery slope. But photographers, let's not be dickheads about it, right? I read the room, pick your battles, and remember, just because you're legally right doesn't mean you want to end up in a massive social media battle and you are the center of it. Because it's a very emotional knee-jerk reaction to, right, I'm going to the lawmakers, I'm going to change it. But there will be a lot of people who jump on that. And if you've got to remember who your clients are, because they might feel, well, I wouldn't want someone photographing my kids without permission. You're a nice person, but, you know, I don't want a massive telescopic lens up their nose photographing them. And I think, you know, we're all about protecting the children. So I can understand how emotions have got high. It's quite the storm. Anyway, what do you think? Would you have deleted it? Would you have stayed with it? Would you have kept it? And would you have just gone about your day and gone, listen, love, the law's on my side. See you later. That was a terrible impression of someone I'm not even sure. So if you like this episode of The Loud Lens, subscribe, let me know what your thoughts are. Are you team photographer rights or take your camera away from the kid? Drop a comment. DM me. Let's start an old-fashioned debate. Let's have a little argument online if we need to. I like a bit of drama. But until next time, keep shooting, keep creating, and just for pity's sake, don't get sued. This has been Khandie, and this has been an episode of The Loud Lens. I'll see you all soon, bubs.